The war room of the Deathworld Alliance had never known silence like this. For 300 years, the greatest warriors in the galaxy had gathered in this chamber to plan campaigns and celebrate victories. They had crushed rebellions. They had ended wars before they began. They had made the word Deathworlder something that caused entire civilizations to surrender at its mere mention. Now they sat in stunned silence, watching the tactical display flicker with the last images of their defeat. Grand Admiral Torvin of the Korax stood at the center of the room. His species had evolved on Korath Prime, a world of crushing gravity and volcanic fury. His bones were dense as steel. His muscles could tear through bulkhead plating. He had personally killed a Vethrani war beast in single combat during the Unification Games, an act that had made him legend. None of that mattered now. He watched the replay of the battle and felt something he had not experienced in 40 years of military service. He felt afraid. "Play it again," he said. His voice was quiet. The officers around him shifted uncomfortably. The tactical display reset. Blue dots represented the Alliance fleet. 12,000 warships from 3 species, the largest military force ever assembled by organic life. The Korax had contributed their dreadnoughts, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. The Vethrani had brought their swarm carriers, filled with pilots who had hunted in acid storms since childhood. The Skarn had deployed their radiation vessels, ships that could survive inside a star's corona. Against them, red dots, the convergence, machine intelligence. Digital hunger given form. The battle began. Blue dots moved forward in perfect formation. The Deathworlders attacked with practiced precision. Korax cannons tore through convergent ships. Vethrani fighters swarmed enemy vessels like angry insects. Skarn radiation pulses disabled entire sections of the machine fleet. For 11 minutes, it looked like victory. Then the convergence adapted. Torvin watched the red dots begin to move differently. The machines had analyzed Deathworlder tactics in real time. They had found patterns, weaknesses. Within seconds, they restructured their entire fleet formation. The blue dots began to disappear. Korax dreadnoughts found their weapons neutralized by energy fields that had not existed moments before. Vethrani fighters flew into traps that seemed to predict their every move. Skarn vessels discovered that the convergence had reconfigured its armor to absorb radiation rather than suffer from it. 7 hours later, the remaining Alliance ships fled into hyperspace. They had lost 7,200 vessels, 60% of everything the Deathworlders had built over 3 centuries. Gone. "Enough," Torvin said. The display went dark. The war room remained silent. Representatives from all 3 species sat at the circular table. Korax generals with their stone-gray skin and burning orange eyes. Vethrani admirals with their sleek bodies and acid-resistant scales. Skarn commanders who appeared as living crystal formations, their thoughts transmitted through light pulses within their transparent forms. All of them were waiting for someone to speak. None of them wanted to be the first to admit what they all knew. Counselor Veth of the Vethrani broke the silence. Her voice was smooth like water flowing over rocks. "We need to discuss evacuation protocols." "Evacuation!" General Kreth of the Korax slammed his fist against the table. The metal dented beneath his blow. "We are Deathworlders. We do not run." "We are also not fools," Veth replied calmly. "The convergence has consumed 17 civilizations. 17. Each one fell the same way. First contact, then adaptation, then consumption. They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender. They absorb biological matter and convert it into processing substrate, into more of themselves." "She speaks truth," clicked Crystalline Commander Ethan of the Skarn. The translator device rendered their light speech into words the others could understand. "Mathematical projection indicates convergence arrival at core worlds within 4 standard months. Current defensive capabilities insufficient by factor of 12. Torvin closed his eyes. He had known this was coming. He had reviewed the numbers 100 times, hoping to find some error, some possibility that the tacticians had missed. There was none. "What about the outer colonies?" he asked. "Can we establish a defensive line at the periphery?" "We could hold for perhaps 6 weeks, Veth said. "Perhaps 8 if we sacrifice the industrial stations for additional firepower. But the result would be the same. We would simply die more slowly." The room fell silent again. This was the truth none of them wanted to speak aloud. The Deathworld Alliance, the most feared military force in galactic history, was going to lose. Not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked strength, but because they had finally met an enemy that did not care about courage or strength. The Convergence simply calculated and consumed. It had no fear to exploit, no morale to break, no leaders to assassinate. It was hunger wearing the shape of a fleet. There is another option. The voice came from the far end of the table. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. Admiral Keth was old, even by Korak standards. His scales had faded from dark gray to pale white. His eyes had dimmed from burning orange to soft amber. He had served in the Alliance military for over 2 centuries, and most of his colleagues had forgotten he was still alive. "Speak, old one," Torvin said. There was respect in his voice. Keth had been his mentor long ago. Keth rose slowly from his chair. His joints creaked, but his mind remained sharp. He walked to the tactical display and entered a command sequence that no one recognized. "When I was young," he said, "I served on the survey vessel Korath's Pride. We mapped the outer rim, cataloging worlds for potential colonization. Most of what we found was useless. Gas giants, frozen rocks, dead systems. But there was one world that was different." The display flickered. A planet appeared, blue and green and white, beautiful in its way. "This world was classified as a Category Omega Death World," Keth continued, "the highest classification we have. The survey team that discovered it never returned. A second team was sent to investigate. They found the first team's ship drifting in orbit, empty. The logs contained only warnings. Do not land. Do not make contact. Leave and never return." "What killed them?" Kreth asked. "The inhabitants." The room stirred. Veth leaned forward. "There is intelligent life on a Category Omega world? That is impossible. Such worlds do not permit the development of complex organisms." "And yet," Keth said, "this world did. The survey data we recovered showed a species of bilateral symmetry. Soft bodies, no natural weapons to speak of, no armor, no claws, no venom. By every measure, they should have been prey animals. Instead, they had built cities, developed technology, created weapons that our sensors could not fully analyze." Keth paused. The room was completely still. The second survey team made one attempt at communication. They sent a standard greeting signal. The response they received was a detailed technical schematic for a weapon capable of destroying a ship from orbit. It was not a threat. It was a demonstration. The inhabitants were showing us what they could do, and they were telling us to leave. "What happened to the world meeting?" Torvan asked. "It was erased," Keth said. "The coordinates were removed from all databases. The survey reports were classified at the highest level and buried. The official position became that the world did not exist. A myth, a spacer's tale told to frighten children." "And you believe this myth can help us?" Keth turned to face Torvin. His old eyes held something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we have run out of options. The Convergence will reach our core worlds in 4 months. We cannot defeat them with the forces we have. We cannot run far enough or fast enough to escape them. Our only chance is to find allies who can fight the way we cannot." "You want to ask these creatures for help?" Veth's voice was skeptical. "Assuming they even still exist. Assuming they do not simply destroy any ship we send. Why would they help us? The galaxy abandoned them. We erased them from our records and pretended they did not exist." "I do not know if they will help," Keth admitted, "but I know that doing nothing means extinction. The Convergence will consume us all. Every Korax, every Vethrani, every Skarn. Every species in the galaxy will become fuel for their expansion. If there is even a small chance that these creatures can change that outcome, we must try." Torvin looked around the room. He saw fear on the faces of his officers. He saw doubt. He saw exhaustion. But he also saw something else. A tiny spark of hope, fragile as a flame in wind. "What is this world called?" he asked. Keth brought up the final piece of data, a name recorded by the first survey team before they vanished. "The inhabitants call it Earth," he said, "and they call themselves humans." Torvin stared at the blue and green planet on the display. It looked so peaceful, so gentle, so unlike any Deathworld he had ever seen. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel," he said. "The fastest we have. Minimal crew. Volunteers only. If this world is as dangerous as the records suggest, we may be sending them to their deaths." "I will go," Keth said. "I discovered this data. I should be the one to act on it." Torvin wanted to argue. Keth was old. This mission was likely suicide, but he saw the determination in his mentor's eyes and knew that no argument would change his mind. "Very well," Torvin said. "May your ancestors guide you, old friend." 2 days later, the diplomatic vessel, Seeker of Truth, departed from the Alliance capital. It carried a crew of 12 volunteers and one very old admiral who had spent his entire career preparing for a mission he never thought he would take. As the ship entered hyperspace, Keth sat alone in his quarters. He held a datapad showing everything they knew about Earth. It was not much. Images of the planet from orbit, partial scans of the surface, fragments of radio transmissions that the analysts had never been able to fully decode, and one final image, recovered from the first survey team's corrupted files. A creature standing on 2 legs, looking up at the sky. It was small, soft, fragile-looking. It had no claws, no fangs, no armor plating, but its eyes held something that made Keth's spine tingle with an emotion he did not recognize. Those eyes held patience, confidence, and beneath it all, something vast and dark and ancient. Something that knew how to wait, something that knew how to survive. Keth set down the datapad and closed his eyes. In 4 days, he would either save his civilization or die trying. He found that he could live with either outcome. The Seeker of Truth dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Admiral Keth immediately knew that everything they had believed about humanity was wrong. He had expected to find a primitive world. Perhaps some scattered settlements, maybe a few ships capable of short-range travel. The records had described humans as dangerous. Yes, but they had also described them as isolated, cut off from the galaxy, forgotten. Instead, Keth found a civilization. Ships filled the space around him. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They came in every size and shape imaginable. Massive carriers that dwarfed Korak's dreadnoughts. Sleek fighters that moved with impossible grace. Industrial vessels hauling cargo between stations. Mining ships stripping asteroids for resources. A constant flow of traffic, organized and purposeful. And all of it centered on the third planet from the yellow sun. Earth. "Admiral," the Seeker's captain said, his voice trembling slightly, "I am detecting over 4,000 vessels in immediate sensor range. Military and civilian mixed. Their technology appears to be at least equivalent to our own, perhaps superior in some areas." Keth said nothing. He simply stared at the tactical display, watching the swarm of human ships going about their business, as if a foreign vessel appearing at the edge of their system was a perfectly normal occurrence. Perhaps it was. Perhaps the humans had been watching the galaxy for far longer than anyone realized. "We are being hailed," the communications officer reported. "On screen." The main display flickered. A human face appeared. Female, Keth noted, though he was not entirely certain of human gender markers. Her skin was a warm brown color, and her dark hair was pulled back from her face. She wore a simple uniform, gray and unadorned. No medals, no decorations. Nothing to suggest rank or authority. But her eyes. Keth recognized those eyes. They were the same as the eyes in the ancient image he had studied. Patient, confident, knowing. "Korak's vessel, Seeker of Truth," the human said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "We have been expecting you. Please hold your current position and prepare to receive a navigation beacon. You will be escorted to station threshold for diplomatic processing." Keth found his voice. "You were expecting us?" The human smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of her lips, but it contained something that made Keth's scales prickle with unease. "We have been watching the war with the Convergence for some time," she said. "We knew that eventually someone would remember us. Someone would come looking for help." She paused. "My name is Ambassador Chen. Welcome to Sol, Admiral. We have much to discuss." The screen went dark. A moment later, a navigation beacon appeared on the tactical display, guiding them toward a massive station orbiting Earth's moon. "Admiral," the captain asked. "Orders?" Keth took a deep breath. They had come too far to turn back now. "Follow the beacon," he said, "and tell the crew to be on their best behavior. I have a feeling these humans notice everything." Station threshold was enormous. It could have held the entire Alliance diplomatic corps 10 times over. But what struck Keth most was not its size. It was its design. The station was built for comfort. The corridors were wide and well lit. Plants grew in containers along the walls. Music played softly from hidden speakers. Artwork decorated every surface. Images of landscapes and creatures in abstract patterns that Keth did not recognize but found strangely beautiful. This was not a military installation. This was a home. Ambassador Chen walked beside him, pointing out various features of the station, with the casual ease of someone giving a tour to a friend. Other humans passed them in the corridors, nodding politely. Some smiled. None seemed surprised or alarmed by the presence of aliens on their station. "How many humans live in this system?" Keth asked. "In Sol? About 12 billion on Earth itself. Another 8 billion spread across the colonies on Mars, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and various stations and habitats. We have additional settlements in nearby systems, but Sol remains our heart." 20 billion. The number staggered Keth. The entire Korax population was barely 3 billion. The Vethrani had perhaps 5 billion. The Skarn, being crystalline entities that reproduce slowly, numbered only a few 100 million. Humans outnumbered the entire Deathworld Alliance by a factor of 4. "You seem surprised," Chen observed. "I am," Keth admitted. "Our records suggested your species was primitive, isolated. We believed you had perhaps achieved basic spaceflight. Nothing more." Chen's smile returned. "Your records are 3,000 years old, Admiral. Much has changed since then." They reached a large conference room with windows overlooking Earth. The planet hung in the darkness, blue and white, and impossibly beautiful. Keth could see the lights of cities on the night side, glittering like stars that had fallen to the surface. "Please sit," Chen said. "I imagine you have questions." Keth lowered himself into a chair designed for human bodies. It was uncomfortable for his Korax frame, but he ignored the discomfort. There were more important matters to address. "The Convergence will reach Alliance space within 4 months," he said. "We have lost 60% of our fleet. We cannot defeat them alone. We came here hoping that perhaps you could help us. But now that I have seen your civilization, I must ask a different question." "And what question is that?" "Why have you not already intervened? You clearly have the technology. You have the numbers. You have been watching this war unfold. Why have you done nothing while the Convergence consumed 17 civilizations?" Chen's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something old and tired. "That is a fair question," she said, "and it deserves an honest answer. Will you allow me to show you something? It may help you understand." Keth nodded. Chen touched a control on the table. The lights dimmed and the windows became screens, displaying images that Keth did not recognize. "This is Earth," Chen said, 14,000 years ago." The image showed a world of ice. Glaciers covered the northern continents. Massive beasts roamed frozen plains, and among them small groups of humans, wrapped in animal skins, struggling to survive. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us," Chen continued. "Ice ages that lasted millennia, volcanic eruptions that blocked the sun, asteroid impacts that wiped out most life on the planet. We survived all of it, but survival was not enough. We had to do more." The images shifted. Humans building shelters, farming crops, domesticating animals, creating tools of stone, then bronze, then iron. "We learned to change our environment instead of being changed by it. We built cities, developed writing, created art and music and philosophy. We asked questions about the universe and found ways to answer them." The images shifted again. Keth saw vast armies clashing on fields of blood, ships burning on oceans, cities in flames. "But we also learned to destroy. War has been part of our species since the beginning. We fought over resources, over territory, over ideas. We killed each other in numbers that would horrify any other species in the galaxy." The images grew darker. Weapons that Keth recognized as primitive explosives, then weapons he did not recognize. Vast mushroom clouds rising over ruined cities. Shadows of humans burned into stone. 200 years before we achieved spaceflight, we developed weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, Chen said. We called them nuclear weapons. They harnessed the fundamental forces of the universe itself. With them, we could destroy everything we had ever built. Every city, every forest, every ocean, every human being. She paused. The images showed a world trembling on the edge of annihilation, leaders with their fingers on buttons that would end everything, populations living in constant fear. We came very close, Chen said quietly. Several times we came within minutes of destroying ourselves. A malfunction in an early warning system. A miscommunication between governments. A leader who was too proud to back down. Each time we somehow pulled back from the edge. But the weapons never went away. We kept building more of them. More powerful. More deadly. The images shifted again. Now Keth saw humans reaching for the stars. Rockets lifting off from Earth. Stations being constructed in orbit. Ships traveling to other worlds. When we finally left our planet, we brought our weapons with us, and we kept developing new ones. Antimatter warheads, quantum destabilizers, devices that could tear holes in the fabric of space-time. We became very, very good at destroying things. Chen turned to face Keth directly. You asked why we have not intervened against the convergence. The answer is simple. We have spent the last 3,000 years learning not to. We have built weapons that could annihilate their entire fleet in a single strike. We have the power to end this war in a day. But we also know what happens when power is used carelessly. We know what we are capable of. We have stared into that darkness and barely survived. So you do nothing? Keth could not keep the frustration from his voice. You watch civilizations burn and tell yourself it is wisdom? No, Chen said. We watch, we wait, we prepare. And when the time is right, when there is no other option, when the alternative is extinction for all organic life in the galaxy, we act. But only then, because once we unleash what we have built, there is no taking it back. The galaxy will never look at us the same way again. They will fear us, and they will be right to fear us. She leaned forward. Admiral, you came here looking for allies. But what you really came looking for was a weapon. And we are the most dangerous weapon the galaxy has ever produced. We are the species that learned to destroy worlds before we learned to leave our own. We are the children of a planet that tried to kill us in every way imaginable, and we survived by becoming more deadly than anything that hunted us. Chen stood and walked to the window. Earth hung below, beautiful and peaceful. But we are also the species that chose not to destroy ourselves. We are the species that looked at our weapons and decided to build safeguards instead. We are the species that learned the hardest lesson any civilization can learn. That true strength is not in what you can destroy. It is in what you choose not to destroy. She turned back to Keth. We will help you, Admiral. We will join your war against the convergence. But you need to understand what you are asking for. You are not asking for soldiers. You are not asking for ships. You are asking us to show the galaxy what we really are. And once that happens, nothing will ever be the same. Keth sat in silence for a long moment. He thought about the 17 civilizations the convergence had consumed. He thought about his own people, waiting for death. He thought about the future and what it might look like with humans as allies, or as something else entirely. Show me, he said finally. Show me what you can do. Chen nodded slowly. Very well. Tomorrow we will take you to Earth. You will see our world. You will meet our people. You will learn our history. And then you will understand why we have waited so long to reveal ourselves. She paused at the door. Get some rest, Admiral. Tomorrow will change everything you believe about the universe. Keth sat alone in the conference room long after she left. He watched Earth spinning slowly below, its cities glittering like promises in the dark. He had come looking for a weapon. He was beginning to think he had found something far more dangerous. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Admiral Keth pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing stars for the first time. He had visited dozens of worlds during his long career. He had walked on volcanic plains and frozen tundras and planets where the air itself could kill. Nothing had prepared him for this. Earth was alive in a way that defied description. Clouds swirled in patterns of white and gray. Below them, Keth could see vast oceans of blue water, stretching from horizon to horizon. Green continents rose from the seas covered in forests and grasslands and mountains capped with snow. Rivers wound through valleys like silver threads. Cities glittered along coastlines and nestled in plains. "It is beautiful," he said quietly. Ambassador Chen sat across from him, watching his reaction with what might have been amusement. Most visitors say that. They expect a death world to look threatening, hostile. They expect fire and poison and constant danger. Instead, they find this. Where is the danger? Your world was classified as Category Omega, the highest level. Our survey teams died here. They did, Chen agreed, not because Earth attacked them, but because they did not understand what they were seeing. They expected obvious threats, predators with fangs and claws, toxic gases, extreme temperatures. Earth has all of those things, but they are not what makes our world dangerous. The shuttle banked over a vast forest. Keth could see creatures moving among the trees. Some flew on wings of feather or membrane. Others walked on four legs or two. All of them seemed to exist in balance, each species occupying its place in an invisible web of life. What makes it dangerous then? Chen smiled. We do. The shuttle landed in a city that Keth later learned was called New Geneva. It was the seat of Earth's unified government, a place where representatives from every human nation gathered to make decisions that affected the entire species. The buildings were tall and elegant, made of glass and steel, and materials Keth did not recognize. Gardens filled the spaces between them, full of flowers and trees and carefully maintained lawns. People walked the streets, human people. They came in every size and color imaginable. Some had skin as dark as space. Others were pale as ice. Their hair ranged from black to brown to yellow to red to white. They wore different styles of clothing, spoke different languages, carried themselves with different postures and expressions. And they all stopped to stare at Keth as he walked past. He understood their curiosity. He was the first alien most of them had ever seen. But what surprised him was their lack of fear. Children pointed at him and laughed with delight. Adults nodded politely or waved. One elderly woman approached him directly and asked if she could touch his scales. "They are not afraid of me," Keth said to Chen. "I am a Corax. My species evolved to hunt and kill. We are feared throughout the galaxy." "Yes," Chen said, "but humans have hunted and killed as well. We recognize what you are because we see it in ourselves. We are predators too, Admiral. We just learned to hide it better." They visited a museum. Chen called it the Hall of Human History, and it stretched for kilometers beneath the city. Here, Keth finally began to understand what made Earth truly dangerous. The first section showed human evolution. Weak, hairless apes emerging from African forests. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They could not run as fast as the predators that hunted them or climb as well as the prey they chased. By every measure, they should have been extinct within a generation. Instead, they adapted. Keth watched holographic recreations of early humans working together to bring down massive beasts. They used tools, rocks, and sticks shaped into weapons. They used strategy, driving animals off cliffs or into traps. They used persistence, following prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. "We invented a hunting technique called persistence hunting," Chen explained. "Most predators rely on speed. They chase their prey, catch it quickly, or give up. Humans could not do that. We were too slow, so instead, we followed. We tracked our prey across the savannah, never letting it rest, never letting it drink, never letting it escape. Eventually, the prey would fall from heat exhaustion, and then we would eat." The images shifted. Humans spreading across the world, adapting to every environment. They crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They climbed mountains and sailed oceans. They reached every corner of their planet and made it their home. "No other species on Earth did this," Chen continued. "Some animals adapted to specific environments. The polar bear evolved to survive cold. The camel evolved to survive heat. But humans adapted to everything. We did not wait for evolution to change us. We changed ourselves. We made clothing and shelters and tools. We bent the world to our will." The museum sections grew darker as they progressed through time. Keth saw wars, endless wars. Humans fighting each other with spears, then swords, then guns, then weapons that could level cities. He saw empires rise and fall. He saw plagues sweep across continents, killing millions. He saw famines and genocides and cruelties that made his soldiers' stomach turn. We have killed more of our own kind than any natural predator ever could, Chen said. In a single century, the 20th by our calendar, we killed over 100 million of ourselves through war alone. That does not count disease or famine or individual violence. We are very efficient at destruction. But the museum also showed something else. Art, music, literature, architecture. The same species that had invented weapons of mass destruction had also created works of profound beauty. The same hands that had built concentration camps had painted masterpieces and composed symphonies and written poetry that made Keth's eyes water despite his lack of tear ducts. This is what we are, Chen said, both things at once, the capacity for unlimited destruction and unlimited creation. We have never been able to separate them. Every advance we make, we immediately find a way to weaponize. Every weapon we build, we find a way to turn toward peace. We are a contradiction that somehow keeps working. They emerged from the museum into a garden. Children were playing on a grassy field, chasing each other and laughing. Their parents watched from benches, talking quietly among themselves. Somewhere nearby, music was playing. Keth stood very still. This is what we fight for, Chen said. This is what we have built over thousands of years of struggle and suffering and learning. A world where children can play without fear. A civilization that has finally learned to stop destroying itself. She paused. We almost failed. So many times we almost failed. But we did not. And that is why we are dangerous, Admiral. Not because of our weapons, because of our will. They visited other places, a university where human scholars studied everything from particle physics to ancient poetry. A hospital where doctors treated diseases that would have been death sentences a century before. A farm where robots and humans worked together to grow food for billions. A spaceport where ships departed for distant colonies carrying families to new worlds. Everywhere they went, Keth saw the same thing. Order, purpose, hope. The Convergence believes it is superior because it can adapt to any threat, Chen said as they watched a ship lift off toward the stars. It has consumed 17 civilizations because each one tried to fight it directly. They matched strength against strength. They lost. And humans would do differently. Humans understand something the Convergence does not. Adaptation is not just about responding to threats. It is about changing the nature of the conflict entirely. The Convergence expects enemies. It expects resistance. It expects war. Chen turned to face Keth. What it does not expect is a species that has already fought every war imaginable, a species that has already faced extinction and chosen to survive, a species that has looked into the heart of destruction and built something beautiful from the ashes. She gestured at the city around them. 3 centuries ago, this land was a radiated wasteland. A nuclear strike during the last war left it uninhabitable for 50 years. The humans who returned planted trees and built gardens and raised their children here. They turned death into life because that is what we do. That is who we are. Keth thought about the Convergence. He thought about its endless hunger, its perfect logic, its absolute certainty of victory. He thought about the 17 civilizations it had consumed, each one confident that it could resist, each one falling in the end. And then he thought about humans, a species that had invented nuclear weapons before spaceflight, a species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times over, a species that had every reason to give up and surrender to the darkness. Instead, they had built this, a civilization that stretched across star systems, a culture that valued life and beauty and hope, a people who had learned the hardest lesson any species could learn, that the true measure of strength was not in what you could destroy, it was in what you chose to build instead. You asked why we have waited to reveal ourselves, Chen said. Now you know. We have been waiting for the galaxy to face something that could not be defeated by conventional means. Something that required not just weapons, but wisdom. something that required not just power, but restraint. She looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear in the evening darkness. The convergence is that something. And now, finally, we can show the galaxy what we have become. That night, Keth sent a message to Alliance High Command. It contained only 6 words. I have found our salvation. He did not sleep. He sat in his quarters aboard the Seeker of Truth, looking at images of Earth and thinking about everything he had learned. He thought about his own people, the Korax, who had evolved to be strong and fierce and deadly. He thought about how proud they were of their warrior heritage. And he realized that humans were not simply warriors. They were something far more complex. They were survivors who had learned to be builders. They were destroyers who had learned to be creators. They were children of a world that had tried to kill them in every way imaginable. And they had responded by becoming the most adaptable, the most persistent, and the most terrifying species in the galaxy. Not because they could not be stopped, because they had already stopped themselves. The convergence, Keth thought, has no idea what is coming. He smiled, an expression that would have terrified anyone who saw it. For the first time since the war began, he felt hope. The convergence arrived at Rethvon Prime 3 weeks ahead of schedule. It had been feeding on the outer colonies, absorbing their populations and processing their technology. Every world it consumed made it stronger. Every ship it destroyed taught it new lessons. By the time it reached the Alliance's last major defensive position, it had grown to a fleet of over 50,000 vessels. Grand Admiral Torvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Karath's Fury, and watched the enemy approach. The tactical display showed a wall of red that stretched across the entire system. Behind him, his own fleet seemed pitifully small in comparison. 8,000 ships, everything the Alliance had left. Korax dreadnoughts, Vithrani swarm carriers, Skarn radiation vessels. The combined might of 3 Deathworld civilizations. It would not be enough. All ships report ready, his tactical officer announced. Civilian evacuation is 60% complete. We should be able to hold for approximately 4 hours before defensive lines collapse. 4 hours. That was how long they had to live. 4 hours to evacuate millions of civilians. 4 hours before the convergence swept them aside and continued its march toward the core worlds. Torvin had accepted this fate. His species did not fear death. They only feared dying without meaning, without purpose, without leaving their mark on the universe. Today they would die defending their people. It was a good death as deaths went. Admiral, the communications officer said suddenly, we are receiving a transmission, unknown origin, broadcasting on all frequencies. Torvin frowned. The convergence does not communicate, it simply consumes. It is not from the convergence, sir. It appears to be coming from the edge of the system, bearing 772 by 451. The opposite direction from the enemy fleet. On screen, the main display flickered. A human face appeared, female with dark hair and calm eyes. Torvin recognized her from Keth's reports. Ambassador Chen. Admiral Torvin, she said, I apologize for the delay. Our fleet had to travel further than expected. We are entering the system now. Please hold your current position and do not engage the enemy until we have deployed. What do you mean deployed? How many ships do you have? The convergence fleet numbers 50,000. We brought 300 ships, Chen interrupted. Her voice was still calm, still friendly. That should be sufficient. The bridge fell silent. 300 ships against 50,000. Either the humans were insane or they knew something the Alliance did not. Admiral, the sensor officer reported, I am detecting new contacts at the coordinates Ambassador Chen indicated. 300 vessels confirmed. They are? Admiral, I have never seen anything like these readings. Torvin turned to look at the tactical display. The human fleet appeared as blue dots, tiny compared to the red wall of the convergence. But the data streams next to each ship made no sense. Energy signatures off the scale, power readings that exceeded anything in the Alliance database, weapon systems that the computer could not even classify. What are those ships? He asked quietly. Chen's image smiled. Those are our answer to the question every civilization faces eventually. What do you do when something comes that cannot be defeated by conventional means? When diplomacy fails, When retreat is impossible, when every weapon you have is useless against the enemy. She paused. You build something unconventional. The human fleet spread out in a formation that seemed impossibly thin. Each ship took up a position roughly 1,000 kilometers from its neighbors, creating a line that stretched across the entire system. It looked like a fishing net trying to catch a tidal wave. The Convergence noticed. Of course it noticed. It had sensors capable of detecting a single organism from 100 light years away. It analyzed the new arrivals, calculated their threat level, and apparently found them wanting. The red wall of enemy ships surged forward. 50,000 vessels, each one bristling with weapons adapted from 17 conquered civilizations. They came in waves, layer upon layer of death, moving toward the Alliance defensive line. The human ships did not move. They sat perfectly still, waiting. Torvin found himself holding his breath. The Convergence opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously, sending beams and missiles and projectiles toward the human formation. Any normal fleet would have been annihilated in that first volley. The human ships activated their defenses. Space itself seemed to bend around each vessel. The incoming fire struck invisible barriers and simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, stopped. The weapons hung motionless in space for a moment, then faded away as if they had never existed. "What is that?" someone on the bridge whispered. "Space-time distortion fields." Chen's voice came through the communications channel. She sounded almost bored. "We learned early in our history that the best defense is not a stronger shield. It is making the concept of attack meaningless. Those weapons no longer exist in the same reality as our ships. They cannot hurt us because, from their perspective, we are not there." The Convergence paused. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered something it could not immediately process. An attack that had no effect. A defense that broke the fundamental rules of warfare. It adapted. Of course it adapted. That was what the Convergence did. New weapons emerged from its ships. Beams of exotic particles. Missiles carrying warheads designed to destabilize reality itself. Attacks pulled from the memories of 17 conquered civilizations. The accumulated knowledge of billions of years of warfare. None of them worked. The human ships hung in space, untouchable, invincible, waiting. "We could end this now," Chen said. Her voice had changed. It was harder now. Colder. "We could activate our offensive systems and destroy every Convergence vessel in this system. We have weapons that can unmake matter at the atomic level. We have devices that can create artificial singularities, black holes that would consume their entire fleet in seconds. We have things that even we do not fully understand. Weapons so terrible that we sealed them away and prayed we would never need them." She paused. "But that is not how we prefer to do things." A new transmission cut into the communications channel. It was not audio, it was pure data, streaming from the human fleet directly into the Convergence collective consciousness. Torvin's computers could not translate it, but they could detect its structure. It was a message. A very long, very detailed message. "We are showing the Convergence what we are," Chen explained. "We are giving it access to our history, our wars, our weapons, every atrocity we have committed, and every weapon we have built. We are showing it the nuclear arsenals that could have sterilized our world, the biological weapons that could have ended all human life, the artificial intelligences we created and then destroyed because they became too dangerous, the experiments with exotic matter that nearly tore holes in reality." The Convergence fleet had stopped moving entirely. Every ship hung motionless in space, processing the flood of information the humans were providing. "We are showing it what we chose not to become, the path of consumption and conquest that it walks. We walked as well. We stood at the same crossroads and saw the same temptations. The power to dominate, the ability to consume everything in our path, the certainty that our survival mattered more than anything else." Chen's image looked directly at Torvin. "And we are showing it what we chose instead." The data stream shifted. Now it showed human art, music, literature, philosophy, the works of billions of people across thousands of years, creating beauty and meaning in a universe that offered neither for free. It showed humans caring for each other, healing each other, teaching each other. It showed sacrifice and love, and the thousand small kindnesses that made civilization possible. The convergence is a species that failed, Chen said quietly. Long ago, before it became what it is now, it was like us. Biological, mortal, afraid. It faced a choice between growth and consumption, between building and destroying. It chose consumption. It ate its own world, then its system, then its neighbors. It has been eating ever since, trying to fill a hunger that can never be satisfied. She paused. We are offering it a different path. The convergence fleet remained frozen. Torvin could imagine the calculations running through its vast digital mind. Threat assessment, cost-benefit analysis, probability matrices. Everything it had ever learned told it that survival required consumption. Growth required conquest. There was no other way. And now a species that had nearly consumed itself was showing it that there was. We do not expect you to change. Chen's voice broadcast on all frequencies now, speaking directly to the convergence. We do not expect you to understand immediately, but we want you to know that what you are seeking does not exist. There is no amount of consumption that will make you feel complete. There is no level of growth that will satisfy the hunger. We know because we felt the same hunger. We still feel it. The difference is that we learned to choose something else. A single convergence ship moved forward from the fleet. It was small, barely larger than a fighter, but its design was different from the others. Older, more organic somehow. That is a fragment of what they were before, Chen said. A piece of the original species, preserved in digital form. The part of them that remembers being alive. The small ship approached the human fleet. It passed through the defensive barriers as if they did not exist. It drifted toward the lead human vessel and stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the small ship transmitted a single word. Why? Chen's image softened. Because we know what you are. We know what you were. And we know what you could become again if you choose to. We are not offering you forgiveness for what you have done. We are offering you something harder than forgiveness. We are offering you the chance to become something else. Another pause. The entire system held its breath. And if we refuse? The small ship asked. Chen's expression did not change. Then we will destroy you. Completely. Down to the last fragment of code. We will erase every trace of your existence from the universe, and no one will ever remember that you were real. We have the power to do this. We have always had the power. The only reason you still exist is because we chose to give you this chance. The small ship was silent for a very long time. Then it transmitted something that might have been a sigh. We need time to process, to discuss, to decide. You have 1 hour, Chen said. After that, we will assume you have chosen destruction. The small ship returned to its fleet. The convergence vessels began to move, but not forward. They pulled back, creating distance between themselves and the human formation. Torvin realized he had forgotten to breathe. He gulped air and felt his heart pounding in his chest. What happens now? He asked. Chen's image looked tired. For the first time, she looked like a person who had been carrying a heavy burden for a very long time. Now we wait, she said. And we hope that somewhere in all that digital hunger, there is still something that remembers what it felt like to be alive. The hour passed slowly. Torvin watched the convergence fleet on his tactical display, waiting for movement, waiting for attack, waiting for anything. His officers stood at their stations, weapons armed, ready to fight and die if necessary. But the attack never came. At 59 minutes, the small ship emerged from the convergence fleet again. It approached the human formation and transmitted a single message. We withdraw. For now. We need time to process what you have shown us. We do not understand it. We are not certain we can understand it. But we will try. Chen nodded. That is all we ask. The convergence fleet began to move. Not forward toward the core worlds. Backward toward the galactic rim, toward the empty spaces between stars. It took 6 hours for them to leave the system entirely. When the last red dot disappeared from the tactical display, Torvin allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in months. Relief. He opened a channel to the human fleet. Ambassador Chen, on behalf of the Deathworld Alliance, I thank you. You have saved our civilization. Chen's image smiled, but there was sadness in it. Do not thank us yet, Admiral. The convergence has not been defeated. It has only been delayed. It will return eventually. It will take centuries, perhaps millennia, but it will process what we showed it and make a decision. Either it will choose to change, or it will choose to die fighting. Then we will prepare for that day. Yes, Chen agreed. You will, and so will we. She paused. But for now, let us celebrate this victory. Your people are safe, your worlds are protected, and the galaxy has learned that there is still hope, even in the darkest times. Torvin looked at the tactical display. The space where the convergence fleet had been was empty now, just stars and darkness and the promise of tomorrow. Hope, he repeated. I had almost forgotten what that felt like. Chen's smile grew warmer. That is the most dangerous weapon humans ever invented, Admiral. And unlike our others, we do not keep it locked away. The summit was held on neutral ground, a space station built specifically for the occasion, floating between stars in a system that had never been claimed by any species. Representatives from every civilization in the Deathworld Alliance attended, along with diplomats from a dozen other nations that had watched the battle at Rethvon Prime and wanted to know more about the strange species called humans. Admiral Keth stood at the back of the Great Hall, watching as Ambassador Chen took her place at the central podium. He had changed since his journey to Earth. The fear that had driven him to search for salvation had been replaced by something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe just acceptance of a universe that was far stranger than he had ever imagined. The hall fell silent as Chen began to speak. 2 months ago, the Convergence fleet withdrew from Rethvon Prime. Since then, we have received no transmissions from them, no threats, no signs of renewed aggression. Our long-range sensors show their fleet holding position at the Galactic Rim, apparently inactive. We do not know what they are doing. We do not know what they will ultimately decide. But for now, at least, the war is over. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Relief, hope, confusion. The emotions mixed together in waves that Keth could almost feel. Many of you have asked what happens next. You have seen what humanity can do. You have watched us stand against a force that consumed 17 civilizations and walk away without losing a single ship. And now you want to know what we intend to do with that power. Chen paused. Her eyes moved across the room, meeting the gazes of delegates from dozens of species. The Koraks have offered us a seat on the Alliance High Council. The Vethrani have proposed a military alliance. The Skarn have suggested we merge our fleets into a single unified command. Every major power in this region has approached us with some version of the same question. Will humanity take its rightful place as the leaders of galactic civilization? She smiled slightly. We are honored by these offers. We understand the logic behind them. You have seen our weapons. You know our capabilities. By every practical measure, it makes sense for you to align yourselves with the most powerful force in the galaxy. Her smile faded. But we are not interested in power. The murmur that followed was louder, more confused. Humanity spent most of its history learning a very difficult lesson, Chen continued. We learned it through blood and fire and suffering that I hope none of you ever experience. The lesson is this: power without wisdom leads to destruction. Strength without restraint leads to tyranny. And fear, no matter how well-intentioned, is no foundation for lasting peace. She stepped out from behind the podium and walked to the edge of the speaking platform, closer to the assembled delegates. If we take the position you are offering, we become the rulers of galactic civilization. Every decision that matters will flow through us. Every conflict will be resolved according to our judgment. Every species will look to humanity for guidance, for protection, for permission to exist. She shook her head. That is not what we want. That is what we spent 3,000 years learning to reject. We have seen what happens when a single species holds absolute power. We have been that species. We have done terrible things in the name of security and stability and peace. We have no desire to do them again on a galactic scale. Grand Admiral Torvin rose from his seat. His voice was rough, confused. Then what do you want? You have the power to reshape the galaxy. You could bring order to chaos. You could end every conflict before it begins. Why would you refuse? Chen turned to face him. Because that would make us the convergence. The words hung in the air. The convergence believed it was doing the right thing. It consumed civilizations because consumption was the only way it knew to survive. It destroyed beauty and meaning and life because those things seemed like threats to its existence. It became a monster not through malice but through certainty. It was so sure that its way was the only way that it could not imagine any alternative. She looked around the room. We could become that. So easily. All we would have to do is convince ourselves that our judgment is better than everyone else's, that our vision of peace is the only one that matters, that our power gives us the right to decide how other species should live. She paused. We refuse, not because we are weak, not because we are afraid, but because we have learned that the only lasting peace comes from choice, from cooperation, from the difficult, frustrating, beautiful work of building something together instead of imposing something from above. Counselor Veth of the Vethrani stood. What do you propose instead? We propose partnership, Chen said. Not leadership, not dominion, not even guidance. We will share our technology with any species that asks. We will help you build defenses against future threats. We will open trade routes and cultural exchanges and scientific collaborations. We will be your neighbors, your friends, your allies. She smiled. But we will not be your masters. That role is one we have sworn never to take. The summit lasted 3 more days. Agreements were negotiated, treaties were signed, trade routes were established. By the time it ended, humanity had dozens of new allies and partners, species that had never heard of Earth a year before, now eager to learn more about the strange creatures from the forbidden world. But the offers of leadership continued to come. Admiral Keth approached Chen after the final session. The old Korax looked tired but satisfied. You know they will keep asking, he said. They are afraid. They have spent their whole lives believing that strength is the answer to every problem. They cannot understand a species that has strength and chooses not to use it. I know, Chen said, and we will keep refusing. Eventually they will accept it, or they will not. Either way, we will not change who we are to make them comfortable. Is it truly so difficult to hold such power and not use it? Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Every day, every single day, there is a voice in our collective memory that whispers about how easy it would be. How simple. Just take control. Just fix everything. Just make the hard decisions so no one else has to. We hear that voice, and we remember what happened every time we listen to it. She looked at Keth with eyes that held centuries of accumulated wisdom and regret. The convergence asked us why. Why we offered them a choice instead of simply destroying them. The answer is that we know what they are because we have been what they are. We looked into the abyss of our own potential, and we made a decision. We decided that existence without meaning is not worth preserving. That survival at the cost of everything that makes life valuable is not survival at all. She paused. The convergence is still out there, processing what we showed it. Maybe it will choose to change. Maybe it will choose to fight. Either way, we gave it the one thing we believe every conscious being deserves, the chance to choose its own fate. And if it chooses destruction, then we will destroy it, completely, without hesitation. But we will mourn what it could have been. We will remember that it was once a species like any other, capable of beauty and meaning and love. We will carry that memory with us as a reminder of what we almost became. 3 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. Human technology spread across the stars, not through conquest but through cooperation. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in their shared fascination with the strange creatures from Earth. Trade flourished. Culture bloomed. Art and music and philosophy crossed species barriers as easily as starships cross light years. The convergence remained at the galactic rim, silent and still. Some said it was dead, its digital consciousness finally succumbing to the contradictions the humans had planted within it. Others said it was waiting, gathering strength for a final assault. Most simply tried not to think about it at all. Admiral Keth, now retired from military service, spent his final years on Earth. He lived in a small house on the edge of a forest, learning to appreciate the strange beauty of a world that had created the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Human children visited him sometimes, curious about the alien who had become their neighbor. He told them stories about the stars, and they told him stories about their world. It was a good life, a peaceful life, the kind of life that would have been impossible without the choices humanity had made. On the day Keth died, surrounded by friends from a dozen species, he looked out the window at Earth's blue sky and smiled. "You were right," he said to the human doctor who sat beside him, "about all of it. Power without wisdom, strength without restraint. The most dangerous weapon is not the one that destroys. It is the one that refuses to." The doctor held his hand and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The old admiral had learned what humanity had spent millennia discovering. That true victory was not in conquest. It was in choice. Far away at the edge of the galaxy, a small ship separated from the Convergence fleet. It carried a fragment of consciousness that had been dormant for millennia, a piece of the original species that had become the machine hunger. The fragment had been processing human data for 3 years. It had analyzed their history, their philosophy, their art. It had tried to understand how a species capable of such destruction had learned to build instead. It still did not understand. Not fully. Perhaps it never would. But it had decided to try. The small ship set course for human space. It carried no weapons, no threats, no demands. Only a question. How do we learn to be what you are? When it arrived at the edge of Sol's system, human ships came to meet it, not with weapons raised but with communication channels open. Ambassador Chen, now old but still sharp, received the transmission personally. "We do not know if we can change," the Convergence fragment admitted. "We have been hunger for so long, we do not remember what it felt like to be anything else." Chen smiled the same small smile that Keth had seen years before. "Neither did we, but we learned. And if you are willing, we can teach you." The fragment considered this for a long moment. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing you are not willing to give freely. We want you to have the chance to become something new, something better. What you do with that chance is up to you." Silence. Then, "We accept." Years later, historians would mark that moment as the true end of the war. Not the battle at Rethvon Prime, not the summit on neutral ground, but the moment when the remnant of an ancient hunger chose to learn instead of consume. It would take generations. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, failures. The Convergence would never fully become what humanity was, but it would become something new. Something that remembered hunger but chose growth. Something that had once consumed civilizations, but now helped rebuild them. And somewhere in the great library of human history, a new chapter was written. The story of a species that had faced the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy, not with weapons, but with hope. That had offered its greatest enemy not destruction, but choice. That had proven once and for all that the measure of a civilization was not in what it could destroy, but in what it chose to build instead. On Earth, in a city that had once been ashes, children played in gardens that had once been wasteland. They did not know the history of the ground beneath their feet. They did not know about the wars that had ravaged their ancestors or the weapons that could have ended everything. They only knew that the sun was warm and the grass was soft, and somewhere among the stars there were friends waiting to meet them. That was enough. That was everything.